let me see if Hugo has come in. So while he joins us, let me give a quick introduction to Hugo. Uh, he is from Netherlands but currently based in Kenya. He himself has been a top-notch marathoner. His best timing has been 2:12 at Amsterdam 2004, where he finished fifth. His wife has been a world-class racer herself, Hilda Kibet, and has participated in 2012 Olympics. The family stays currently in Kenya, and so it'll be exciting to talk to him on what he sees, the potential of running in the country, and also how his training has taken him to multiple places. Yeah, here I think he has just joined in. So Hey, hi Hugo, how are you?
Hi Vijay, I'm good. How are you?
Good. So I hope the audio is clear. We have had a check yesterday, but I'm just hoping that we have the audio which is clear. So if we find any feedback from the audience, then we can probably correct it. But
okay.
Meanwhile, just before you came in, I actually gave a introduction of yours. So thank you for coming down to join this live program from Kenya.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's my pleasure.
So again, to repeat, Hugo himself has been a top-notch marathoner, and he in fact has a 2:12 marathon to his credit, and if I'm not mistaken, has run a 1:03 half marathon. And currently, he is a coach based out of Kenya, and he is currently a head coach for the Elite Distance Running Program, which is a joint project between ProCam and Global Sports Communication and the Sports Authority of India. And he has a wonderful set of athletes who he trains at the Sports Authority of India in Bhopal. Many of them, I believe, also visit Kenya for their training. And Hugo himself has been a visitor to India multiple times. I remember recently he was actually in India when the Kalo India Games were happening in Guwahati. So he knows a little bit about how the Indian sports structure is evolving, as also how the amateur circuit is going on in India. So today we talk about a few of the things. We have around half an hour to talk to him, and we also will take some audience questions while we go on. So Hugo, ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Thank you for the introduction, Vijay.
Yeah, so firstly, everyone is today talking about the COVID-19 situation. So how is it in Kenya? How are the athletes taking it? And how about you?
The outbreak is not as widespread yet, not like in India, for instance, or in other parts of the world. I think we have 216 cases so far, with 9 people who died from it and others that recovered. In the area where the athletes live, which is mostly Iten, Eldoret, Kaptagat, these is where all the top athletes train, there has been only 1 case. So in that way, it's not that widespread, but people are being careful. There's no full lockdown, but in general, people are persuaded to stay at home as much as possible, and athletes are not allowed anymore to train in groups. And all the camps are closed. So actually, I would say probably for the athletes, it has a very big impact on their life, actually, even bigger than, for the average person, because most athletes stay in a training camp or stay just with a group of athletes together and they train together every day. That's not possible. So everyone has to go by themselves.
Okay. And are they still allowed to do those long distance runs in Kenya right now?
Yes. Anyone is allowed to go outside. You're allowed to go to the shop, to the bank, and you're allowed to go for training. You can train as much as you want, as long as you do it alone. So not with two people. There were actually some people put in jail for a few hours. Sorry.
Okay.
Because they ran in a group, So this is no longer allowed. But you can train as much as you want as long as you do it by yourself.
So one of the articles that I was reading was obviously during this phase, there is a lot of detraining which happens, and your fitness levels comes down because you're not training with as much intensity as a normal athlete does. So are you concerned about this detraining which happens, and do they actually get back to their normal fitness condition in a few weeks or in some years, some months?
Yeah, of course, there is some concern, and definitely, if you're used to train very hard at the top of your ability, then it's very possible that your fitness level goes down. But it depends a bit on how much you can do. I mean, I am still coaching our athletes. Our team has, we have not very big team, 18 athletes. I'm talking about the Indian team that I coach. All of them are at home now, and because many of them live in villages, they are still able to train, and some are doing better than others. With some of them, you can really see that because of the lockdown, they are losing a lot of fitness. And with others, you actually see that they maintain their fitness or even continue to grow as they always do, because they, when someone lives somewhere in the Himalaya mountains in a small village, they can still train pretty well, So I stay in touch with them. I give them the training program. They give me all the feedback, and so it really depends on the person, on how much they're able to train. But the other side is you never lose something permanently.
Sure.
You may lose a little bit of speed, a little bit of aerobic fitness. You may even lose a lot, but once this thing is back to normal, of course your fitness also comes back to normal. And they may take a month or 2 months, but sure. I'm not too concerned about that. For me, the main thing is, like, we have two guys, the two best guys in our team, Murli Gavit and Abhishek Pal, who both have a chance to qualify for the Olympics, but they're not yet at the level that they would qualify, so they still have to improve. So they should not simply maintain their fitness. For if they maintain their fitness for the next, let's say, 6 to 9 months, it's going to be very hard for them to qualify for the Olympics. They have to improve.
Correct.
You know what I mean? So that's a bit of a challenge, of course.
So let's talk a little bit about yourself, right? So I've been telling the audience that you have yourself been a top-notch road racer, runner, and has actually had a top 5 finish in Amsterdam in 2004 with a 2:12 finish. Now, to put it in perspective, a 2:12 finish is something probably close to the national record in India, if not a national record. So can you just spend a few minutes telling the audience about your own journey as an athlete?
Yeah, sure. I'll try to keep it short because I can talk for 1 hour about it. But when I was young, I actually did judo and football. I was a very active child, but I didn't run. But at the age of 13, I did my first race, just a local road race, which I got second. And that's where you can say the running virus is not a nice word now to use, but you know what I mean. I started to enjoy running because I saw that I was good in something. And I did not start training seriously until the age of 15, which is a good way to start, actually. So by the age of 15, I started training 3 to 4 times a week. And every year increased a bit, the next year, every year, a little bit more training, a little bit more mileage, a little bit harder. When I was 18, 19, I was among the best junior runners in my country. But since I started from a young age, my goal was always to become the best runner I could be. And I always had in my mind that I would be a marathon runner. So I've always combined running 5,000 meters, 10,000 half marathon and full marathon. But once I started running marathons, that was at the age of 24, I saw that was my, my strength. So, so that's what I did. And I've always done everything to become the best I could be. When I first wanted to become a doctor, but then I decided that would be difficult to combine being a doctor with being a good runner. So I decided to study human movement sciences, which
Sure.
is great because that helps me now to be a coach. And then later, when I got a job, when I finished my master's degree, I knew that I don't want to have a full-time job, because with a full-time job you can't, be a world-class or even national-class athlete. It's impossible. So I just did my best to look for a 24-hour-a-week job. 20 to 25 hours a week. So I worked 4 to 5 hours a day, and that's what I did for many years until I was at the level that I could become a professional runner completely. So I stopped working at the age of 31 and moved to Kenya with my wife, who was born in Kenya. We lived together in the Netherlands for 7 years, and she also became a world-class athlete, much better than I ever became, actually. She was 5th at the World Championships cross country, for instance. She was European champion. So we moved to Kenya and spent the rest of my career here in Kenya, where I still live now.
Yeah, thanks, Hugo, for that. Now let's get back to India, and this one interesting question that whenever I get a chance to talk to you, I often ask you. So there are these Kenyan athletes or the African athletes. Then there is say European and rest of the world athletes, and then there are the Indian athletes. So I'm talking about distance running. So what really separates these athletes from different countries? A lot of people attribute it to the genes. Is that the only thing that differentiates them, or what is your perspective on this?
Yeah, when it comes to long distance running, I mean, it's definitely true that it's basically East Africa that is dominating by far. I mean, if you look at the top 100 times in the world on the marathon, 93 are from East Africans. So these are Kenyans, Ethiopians, maybe a few that are born in East Africa but now run for another country, like Mo Farah. And then there are 5 Moroccans and a European and a Japanese, right? So the world of distance running is really dominated by East Africans. And of course, talent or genes play a large role there. That's true. On the other hand, it's not a coincidence also that right now 2 of the best European runners live just around the corner here. Just 1 kilometer from me, we have Sondre Moen, who is a Norwegian guy who ran a 2:05 marathon, which put him in the top 100 in the world. And then there is Julian Wonders, who is a Swiss athlete who runs 59 on a half marathon. So it's not just the genes, it's also the whole culture here, the focus, the 20,000 people who train very hard every single day. And Kenya has a system where every single person who has a talent for running will be discovered, because everyone runs in school. In school, you all run, right? So although genes play a role, there's much more than that. And it doesn't mean that the rest of the world can't win medals. It just means that, when you look at to reach the world top, you need a certain amount of talent. Where maybe India has 5 of those talents, Kenya has 500 of those talents, right? And so when it comes to talent, I think India is comparable with the rest of the world. If you can say, the problem in India is there is a lot of talent, I believe, from the traveling around, from the people that I see. I mean, I've been working only for a few years, and we started with a few raw athletes. Murli Gavid, who ran 33:20 on a 10K 5 years ago. Now he's the #1 Indian runner. Abhishek Paul, now the 2nd Indian runner. And I believe there are many more coming. So the talent is there, but it's not yet. There are not yet enough talented Indian runners that that even go into running. India doesn't really have a very big sports culture, apart from cricket, of course. So there is, if you compare, for instance, India with Japan, right? People sometimes ask me, like, can Indian runners win a medal at the Olympics? I say, yes, it's definitely possible, but the first thing you have to do is get more runners that can even qualify for the Olympics. for instance, you know about a lot about running. When you want to win a medal in the 5,000 meters, you have to run around 13:00 on a 5K or below, right? India right now has two runners who run under 14 minutes. That's
Okay.
Murli and Abhishek, the two guys that I coach. From 2019, if you look at 2019, there were two Indian runners that ran under 14 minutes. At the same time, there are 104 Japanese runners that ran under 14 minutes, right? So in India, we have to make sure instead of having two runners under 14, we first have to get 50 runners or 100 runners under 14 minutes before we start thinking about winning Olympic medals. In other words, you know, if you can imagine if you are, you know, fishing in a pool where there's almost no fish, how do you expect to, you know, to catch the biggest fish of all, you know? So, but there is a lot of talent in India, and yeah, that's my role to, you know, stimulate people and to find the right talents and to make sure that they keep having the right focus.
Great.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So just taking off from the answer that you gave, now you have a pool of athletes. If I remember talking to you, you said you train a set of people in India. So, what would be the ideal age for any teenager to get into long distance or mid distance running? What is the ideal age where parents should actually look at pushing their kids or letting them get into the professional circuit or competitive circuit?
Good question. I like that actually that you asked that, because for my feeling, there are too many people who kind of push their children from a little bit too young age. In running, if you want to become a really good distance runner, you should probably start training seriously from the age of 15, maybe 14, maybe 16, but not too young. I would prefer, you know, if I see some young kids that I think are talented for running, let them do other sports. Let them do hockey, football, you know, different kind of sports. That is the best thing, you know. They let them develop a whole range of, you know, motor abilities, and let them play basically, because, you know, running is also a little bit kind of a serious thing, you know. For long, you know, adults like it, but how many kids who are 10 or 12 just, you know, like to run loops around the track and stuff? I loved it. Although we did a lot of, I mean, I loved it from a pretty young age, but I started at the age of 15, which is good. So I would say, yeah, if you have a child who is good in running, let them do different sports. Maybe sometimes run a competition, but preferably 3K, 5K, not more than that. And then when they are 14, 15, or 16 years old, you know, that's the time you want them to train more seriously.
So there's a question with which Manish Jaiswal has just asked. Is there an age where one graduates into a half marathon or a full marathon? Because you see a lot of athletes who do track and field, and then when they get older, they get into these road races. So is there an age where they can start attempting those half marathons and full marathons?
It's a good one. I would say that it depends a bit on your talent and what you can handle, and it depends also from which perspective you look. You know, if you think about just, you know, you're enjoying what you're doing, you can do half marathons from the age of 18 or 16 even, or 20, if you are seeing it as an amateur. But if you want to become the best runner you can be, I would say you probably have to wait. You better wait a bit until you're at least 21, 22, before you move to the half marathon. And yeah, so you want to have at least enough training under your belt and have at least had some focus on shorter distances first.
Sure. So this takes me to the next question, where there is always a dilemma, always a kind of a debate between speed and endurance.
Yes.
So this is a dilemma which actually is there even when you grow up, when you're an actual marathoner or a road racer, but it actually comes into when you are actually growing as a teenager, because you don't do enough of speed works. I've heard that you lose speed for life. So what is your perspective as a speed and endurance, and how do people actually look at it?
It's a good one. Yeah, I think in the end, you have to train both of them. You have to train the speed and the endurance. Although sometimes people confuse speed for doing like hard track sessions, and that's not the same. when it comes to developing speed in young athletes, you have to think about 10 seconds all out, or even shorter than that, a 60 meter or 100 meter. What we do with our athletes also often are hill sprints. So you go up the hill for like 8 to 10 seconds all out, and you take a 2-minute recovery, and you do that several times. But at the same time, you have to work on the endurance by doing easy runs. One of the, the big, things that help you to improve, the one big, determinants of performance is how much mileage you can handle. And this is a matter of building up year by year by year. When you know that the best elite athletes, the world-class athletes on a 5,000 meter or 10,000 meters are running anything between 160 and 180 kilometers per week. And you can't just go from 40K per week to 160, right? So every year you add another 10K or 5K or 15K, depending on what you can handle. So yes, you have to do the endurance and you have to do some speed. And how much of each you should do depends mostly on where you can see that your talent is. When you're 12 or 15 years old and you do some running and you see like, hey, I am really good in 100 meters or 200 meters. Yeah, you feel like, long distance running just makes you tired and you don't enjoy it. You probably want to focus much more on the speed and do a little bit easy runs, but not more than 40 minutes. Whereas if you're a guy like me, who just could keep on going and going without getting tired, and sprinting, I was never really good, then okay, you're not a good sprinter. You're never going to be a good sprinter, because sprinting is something you have to have talent for it, much more than long distance running. Long distance running, you can become a long distance runner by doing the right training. But if you were not a sprinter to begin with, you can't become a sprinter. You can never become fast if you're let's say if you're in school and out of the 40 kids you're number 20. You're not going to be a really good sprinter. But it doesn't mean that you should ignore the sprinting part. You should still do some of it, just not so much.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. So that really gives a lot of heart to the amateur runners who actually take up running later in their lives and want to excel in amateur running. So Hugo, you have had an opportunity to look at amateur running in India. So how do you rate the evolving amateur running scene in India?
Well, to be honest, I don't know so much about it, but I've been, for instance, at the Hyderabad Marathon. I was invited there, to be a speaker and to be with the athletes, and I was surprised with the high number of amateur runners, who were. It's my daughter. Oh,
hello.
Hey, she's crying.
No
worries. Hey, zie je dat? Nou, moet ik gaan even naar naartoe. I'm in a live. Sorry. Okay, so I'm surprised with the big number of Indian amateur runners. I think running is becoming booming in India, and maybe the running boom in India came a little bit later compared to Western Europe. Maybe it had to do with development and. There must be enough people who actually have time to run next to their jobs, right? And I know it's sometimes hard in Indian cities where, a lot of people work quite hard, and sometimes they're in traffic jam for another 2-3 hours per day.
Sure.
But yeah, I was surprised to see, so many amateur runners in India, and I think it's just going to grow and grow for the next 5 to 10 years.
Great, thanks. So another question which always comes around, at least in the amateur running circuit, is how far can an amateur athlete go? Because everyone has other things to do. You have family to take care. You have work to do. So if I have to look at benchmarks in different distances, it can vary from country to country. Like Japan would be different. US would be different. Kenya would obviously be a different country altogether. But full marathon, for example, a 2:45, 2:40 is a stretched target for an amateur runner, right? When you talk about a half marathon, anything between 110 to 115 would be a stretched target. If you talk about 10K, anything below 35 would be a stretch target for a lot of people. So is it something that people can dream about as an amateur runner, or do you think there is a limit to the excellence that you can go?
Yes to both. There is definitely a limit to the excellence you can go, but the 2 hour 45 on a marathon for an amateur runner is possible if that person is talented. I mean, I personally coach some athletes online, amateur runners, and one of them is an electrician, a very determined guy who lives in New York. He's like 40 years old. He has a full-time job as an electrician, but he ran a 2 hour 38 marathon. So, I mean, and that's not because I'm a great coach. That's just because this guy is talented, and he probably, you know, if he would be a full-time athlete, he could be running 220 or something. And now with a full-time job, he runs 238, right? So, of course, your talent limits you. That's true. But at the same time, it must be possible if you have the talent and you train daily, you have the time to train daily to, you know, to run a really good marathon. And for some people, that's 3 hours and 20 minutes. And for some people, that's 2 hour 55. And for some who are really talented, that can be 2 hour 40 while having a full-time job and a family.
Yeah, so that answers the question. So that's where probably the talent comes into the picture.
Yes.
Along with hard work. So I had another question, which probably one of the people asked is, you talked about mileage going up to 200 kilometers, 250 kilometers for an elite runner, and you have the other end of the spectrum at 40 kilometers, etc. So what is the mileage that you as a coach suggest to, I'm talking about more of amateur runners now, because the audience here is more of people who are amateur runners. So what is your suggestion as to how much mileage should there be for a full marathon or a half marathon kind of road race?
Yeah, I understand. And again, you know, I understand that people like to get a certain fixed number, but it really depends on the person. And, you know, I coach a guy from Jakarta who runs around 70 kilometers per week. And he over the last 2 years, he improved from 3 hour 55 to 3 hour 25. So he's now on 3 hour 25 with 70K per week. And probably if he wouldn't have such a busy job and he, you know, he's just, you know, just like you described, having a job and having a family, maybe he could increase to 100K per week and run faster, because you often see that up to a certain extent, if you increase the mileage, you can run a better marathon.
Sure.
Right? It doesn't count for every person. It doesn't count for every distance. But in general, if you can increase the mileage, you improve your performance on the marathon, but as long as you can recover from it. So for this guy, 70K, 75K per week is the maximum. Because, you know, with all the other things in his life, you know, if I increase it to more, he will get injured. There's another guy I coach from Israel. He runs around 120K per week. Right, and he's also an amateur runner. He, you know, he has a very, very busy job, not a family, but still, you know, he runs 120K per week. He can handle that. So, yeah, roughly between 60 and 120K per week. That's what you see amateur runners do, depending on their age and their ability and, you know, their training history. What is mostly important, I think, is that you build up step by step. That's the main thing. If you're now in 40K per week, don't say like, okay, you know, by the end of the year, I want to be in 80K per week. No, build up step by step. And sometimes you have, maybe you go to 60K and then that might be a bit hard. So you do it for 1 week, then you go down again to 45 or 50. And, you know, it's good to keep track of what you're doing. You keep a diary and check your mileage and just try, you know, over the years to increase your mileage.
That's a good guidance, good thumb rule for people who are listening to you. I also wanted to talk to you a little about the Kenya experience that you run. A lot of Indian amateur athletes, even elite obviously, but a lot of Indian amateur athletes want to come to train in Kenya and experience the way the elites train in Kenya. So I know that you do a program or a content like that. Can you tell what are the how it is done, how should people apply, and what are the costs in general? Maybe talk for 2-3 minutes. That should be fine.
I think I'll keep it shorter than that, because the main thing is, if people want to know more about the cost, I don't even know the cost actually, because I'm the coach. I'm not the CEO of the company, but they can go to www.traininkenya.com. What we do is we have about 10 camps per year. Each camp is about 2 weeks, 13 days actually. And in those camps, people, so they are here for 2 weeks, and they train once or twice a day. And it's just full of experiences. They learn a lot about the Kenyan running, what makes Kenyan runners so good, apart from their talent, but what are all the aspects about the Kenyan life that can explain why Kenyan runners are so good. They meet Kenyan top athletes and talk with them, and upcoming runners. And at the same time, we try to give them all the information that we have and that I have, to make them the best runner they can be, so that they just go home with a whole box of knowledge, and they know everything when it comes to speed, endurance, drills, exercises, and just everything they need to know, basically, for the rest of their running career, that can help them to become a better runner.
And how I mean, is there a time frame before which people should apply for it, and then is there a waiting period or something like that?
Anyone can apply and join, as long as you pay, of course. So there is, there are people who run 4.5 hours on the marathon. There are people who run 2.5 hours on the marathon. There are people who are more like 1,500 to 5K runners. The main thing is that everyone who joins is an amateur. Some of them are maybe close to being a bit more professional, but mostly it's amateur runners. And they all have a passion for running, and that's the only thing important. You love running and you want to learn. That's the main thing. And of course, if you're not used to train more than 3 times a week, you don't have to join all the sessions. There are some sessions that we say to some runners like, hey, you are not used to train so hard. Why don't you go to the gym and do some cycling instead of going for another run, right? So we make it a training program based on what they can handle.
Okay. Yeah. So I have a couple of more questions for you before I let you go. So this is more to do with the fact that you have actually seen athletes at close quarters. You live in Kenya, and you have seen the elitist of the elite people racing. So when you talk about the legends of the sport today, it is Kipchoge and Bekele. I mean, how different are they? Hard work, talent, what do they do, and what is the difference between the two of them?
That's a good one. That's a good one. Of course, I am not personal with them. I know Eliud Kipchoge, and he's not my best friend, but if I would meet him, we would have a small talk, right? Okay. But Bekele, I don't know him personally very well, but my impression from both of them is that Kipchoge is a person who is like the embodiment of what I call the growth mindset. And this is something I also try to show and to my athletes and to teach them. With the growth mindset is that you don't run because you want to win the competition next week. You run because you want to become the best runner you can ever be. So you always try to improve yourself. Whatever you do, you always try to become better. And Kipchoge is the perfect example of that. He's always busy trying to improve, always trying to work on himself. He's a super stable guy, super humble, super motivated. And he's a super talent also, but that's why he's the best in the world. But I think what separates him from others is his mindset. It's really his mindset. That's what separates him from others. And apart from that, I think he has really superior running form. And then someone like Bekele, I know him less, but from what I see from him, he has more ups and downs. He looks to me like someone who can be super focused for a little while and have an amazing performance, but then he goes down, he loses maybe some motivation, maybe his attention is on other things, he probably gains 4 or 5 kilos of weight, so that looks to me with Bekele. I think if Bekele had the mindset of Kipchoge, I don't know, he might be even better than him, but I think that's a little bit the difference between those, from the impression that I can have, I have from them.
Thank you so much. I think that's very nicely put. So the other question that I quickly want to touch is on diets. Like, I have a question which has come up. You talk about keto diet, vegan diet, having a vegetarian diet. does these diets affect running per se? Is it so much of a factor in your running performance?
Of course, diet has to be good. I mean, it's no doubt that if your diet is mostly based on fast food, on pizza and McDonald's kind of French fry stuff, yeah, forget about it. Your recovery is not going to be good.
Sure.
It's clear. But at the same time, I don't think we should put too much. How do you say? You don't have to go into too much detail when it comes to recovery, and especially when you're an amateur runner and you train, for instance, 4 times a week. You don't have to worry so much about it as compared to when you're a top athlete. But of course it matters, and that's why I'm also thankful for Fast&Up for supporting our 3 top girls, that you help them with some sports nutrition. Because it definitely matters, when you train twice a day, every single day. You can imagine you have done the morning session and then you have an evening session again, and you want to be sure that you recover as much as possible. So then nutrition definitely helps. Yeah.
Sure. So we have actually completely run short of time. So I think I would like to conclude this session just thanking you. Maybe seeing you sometime soon when the COVID situation improves back in India. I think your athletes back home are quite eager to have you back to see you and get more guidance, especially with the Olympics being postponed to 2021. So thank you very much and look forward to seeing you. And if you have a small message for your athletes who probably would be hearing you right now, please do share, and then we can call it a day.
Okay, thank you, Vijay, for inviting me. I was happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to be back in India, actually, because the same counts for me. My athletes is like my children almost. Like I want to be with them and see them run and guide them. So all I can say to my athletes, because I do have contact with them every day, and we have Zoom calls with the whole group every week. But what I would say to them is keep the fire burning, and never forget that running is not only something short term, but it's a 10-year career. So every single day is a day to improve. So if you keep the fire burning, then you're going to do well.
Thank you very much, Hugo, for the time. I appreciate your time and having you here. And goodbye. See you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye everyone. Bye.